Today I'm going through another of my chapters of my book, Immortal. And I think this is important, obviously, or I wouldn't be doing this. But here's a chance for you to get, in just a few minutes, what I say in an entire chapter on symbolic immortality. And yes, this is something that I think is that we really need to understand this, because every one of you watching this has engaged one way or another in symbolic immortality. So let us take it get right into it. Symbolic immortality. The title of the chapter is Symbolic Immortality Projects. Most people realize that literal immortality isn't going to happen. It's just not. Wish it would. A lot of people, as I said in the last video, are hoping that one day science is going to figure it out and I'm going to be able to live forever. Okay, good luck with that. But anyway, so most people realize that literal immortality isn't coming. But in one way or another, we all, except for those who have a robust view of eternal life in Jesus, we all engage in symbolic immortality in some way to have our lives go on. The key book on this, by the way, was the book entitled The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. I think he wrote that in 1974. But, it's interesting because 2 years after he wrote it, he died of cancer. So he didn't live very long. But in the introduction, a fellow named Sam Keen sums it up. Sam Keen says, to cope with his mortality, man tries to transcend death by participating in something of lasting worth. We achieve ersatz immortality by sacrificing ourselves to conquer an empire, to build a temple, to write a book, to establish a family, to accumulate a fortune, to further progress and prosperity, to create an information society and a global free market. So true. And this, by the way, the idea that people are striving for some sort of symbolic immortality is not new, or the belief in this. Plato said, if we think of the ambition of men, we will marvel at their senselessness, unless we consider how they are stirred by the love of an immortality of fame. Plato also said, those seeking symbolic immortality are ready to run risks greater far than they would have run for their children, and to spend money and undergo any sort of toil, and even die for the sake of leaving behind them a name that will be eternal. Last quote from Plato, he says, for I am persuaded that all men do all things for the sake of the glorious fame of immortal virtue, and the better they are, the more they desire this, for they are ravished with the desires of the immortal. I think Plato is right, by the way. To bring this into a little bit more modern day, a fellow named Edwin Scheidman was the first professor of thanatology, that's the study of death, at UCLA. He was chief of the first national suicide prevention program at the National Institute of Mental Health. Founded the American Association of Suicidology, and authored many books about death and suicide. In other words, Scheidman wasn't a philosopher who maybe spent a year studying death and how people react to it, and then he wrote a book on the subject. Rather, he studied death his entire occupation. That was what he did for a living his whole life. He contemplated death most of his life. So how did Scheidman deal with his own death? In A Common Sense Book of Death, Reflections at 90 of a lifelong thanatologist, Scheidman wrote, I have a keen investment in my post-self, my reputation after I'm dead. I take a special pleasure, a narcissistic delight in the thought that these words will live in a future that is not mine, what Melville called a posthumous glory to come. That's not bad. Then Scheidman gets rapturous. I'll tell you my answer to Romeo's question, what's in a name? Plenty. Investment in self, pride, identity, in the future, self-worth, fulfillment, the antidote to emptiness and nothingness and despair. And then he goes on, but there's more. I now have deposits in two banks, the gene bank and the library. Apropos the first, the object of which I am most proud on my son's military uniform is not the eagles on his shoulders, nor the 4 rows of ribbons on his chest, but the blue tag on his right breast pocket with my name on it. That's one of the ways we attempt to tame death. Wow, let's think about that for just a minute. He says, son, you've become a colonel in the military. You've got rows of ribbons on your chest. But he says, that's not what makes me proud. What makes me proud is that you're wearing my name. Wow. Wow. Anyway, Michael Shermer, who founded Skeptic Magazine, wrote, we live on through our genes and our families, our loves and our friends, our work and our engagement with others, our participation in politics, the economy, society, and culture, and our contributions, however modest, to making the world a little bit better today than it was yesterday. Notice what the founder of Skeptic Magazine, atheist Michael Shermer says, we live on through the things that we do here, that somehow it's going to transcend our death. And how are people living on? They live on symbolically in a lot of different ways. Probably the biggest one is procreation and adoption. Namely, they have kids, right? We're going to live on through our kids. That's the belief. In fact, Plato wrote, marvel not then at the love which all men have for their offspring, for that universal love and interest is for the sake of immortality, right? So that's how, in Plato's mind, people are living on through their kids. That's why they love them so much. Albert Einstein, bring it a little bit more to current day, although Einstein died some years ago. He says, our death is not an end if we can live on in our children and the younger generation, for they are us. Our bodies are only wilted leaves on the tree of life. There's a lot of problems with the idea that you're going to live on through your children or offspring. Here's the math. The contribution of your genes to your posterity in the following generation averages 50%, right? Your kids are half you. Then their kids are 25% you. Then 12.5%, 6.25%, then 3.125%, then 1.6%, I'm now rounding, then 0.78, then 0.39, then 0.19, then 0.09, and so on. By the 10th generation, your gene contribution is a minuscule 0.05%. In another 10 generations, your gene contribution is 0.000004%. That's all that's living on after 20 generations. That's all of you that's living on after 20 generations. Wow. That's not very much. But it gets worse. And how it gets worse is genes travel over in blocks. And we all know that, if you've studied this at all, that there's recessive and genes that some of them are dominant, some of them are recessive. And after just a few generations, there might not be any of you in your children's children. There might not be any of you. It's all gone. It could be all gone because of what? There's dominant and there's recessive genes. And genes, as I said, travel over in blocks. And so there might not be any of you in 10 generations. Or certainly in 20, there won't be hardly any regardless. Living on through our procreation, not so much in the West, but certainly back, in the Far East, is ancestor veneration. If you're required to remember your loved ones, then your loved ones will be required to remember you. And so in a lot of Asian homes, they'll have little shrine-like things to their loved ones so that, to keep remembering their loved ones. And right then, when you die, they'll put up a shrine for you. So there's ancestor veneration. That's not a lot of actually living on, in my opinion. Genealogy research is also a symbolic immortality project. One genealogy advocate wrote, "People come into this world and struggle for their whole lives, then they die and most are forgotten. Genealogy is my attempt to make sure that doesn't happen in my family." So in other words, I'm going to keep my family alive by, recording this genealogy. Alex Haley, the author of Roots, put it this way: those doing genealogy research can be remembered as the family historians. So what we're going to remember them forever as the family historians. There's another problem with living on through your children. And many times I've asked my classes about this. I've said, how many of you know the first names of all 8 of your great-grandparents? And so far, no one does. No one knows the first names of all 8 of their great-grandparents. I said, because what? You know why they don't? Because nobody cares. So here it is. I'm going to live on through my family. Your family doesn't care to even know your first name by the time you're a great-grandparent. They don't care anymore. This one woman said to me once, "Well, I care." And I said, "Well, what are their first names?" She said, "I don't know." Well, you're not going to live on through your family, folks. That's just not going to happen. If you want to live on for real and be with your family for real, turn to Jesus and make him the Lord of your life, and you can live forever. Another way that people try to live on Symbolic Immortality Project, is through creation. And I've always been interested in the Temple of Artemis of the Ephesians. Was considered one of the 7 wonders of the world. In fact, it was considered the greatest of one of the 7 wonders of the world. But in 356 AD, a guy set its wooden roof on fire, and the wood, of course, burned. The columns collapsed, and the temple was destroyed. They caught him right away, and they asked him why he did it. And he said, "I did it because I wanted to be famous." Well, they tortured him to death. And they did what the Romans later called a damnatio memoriae. A damnatio memoriae is you were never allowed to speak his name again, ever. If anyone ever spoke or wrote the person's name who destroyed the temple of Artemis of the Ephesians, he was to be put to death. That person, he or she, was to be put to death. But we know his name. His name is Herostratus. But basically nobody knows the names of the architects of the temple. But we know the name of the guy that tore it down. And so creation is a way that we try to live on. Michelangelo, who did the Sistine Chapel, by the way, the trouble with the Sistine Chapel, I've been in there once. The trouble with it is one, you have to look up the whole time, right? Because it's on the ceiling. And 2, it was jammed with people. Anyway, I digress. But creation is another way, as I said, of living on forever. And Michelangelo said, "No thought is born in me that has not death engraved upon it." In other words, Michelangelo was creating these great works so that he could live on. Here's an image of a photo of the Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital and Trauma Center. Well, why would Mark Zuckerberg give a lot of money to the hospital? Because he wants his name on it. Another way you could live on forever is by being really heroic. The slavery abolitionist and martyr John Brown said of his coming execution, "I'm worth inconceivably more to hang than for any other purpose." In other words, this was his immortality project. I'm going to live on by being heroic. The drive for fame is something that, well, let's just face it, it drives a lot of people. Indeed, Becker wrote that a fellow who may throw himself on a grenade to save his comrades must feel and believe that he's doing something truly heroic, timeless, and supremely meaningful, and says this striving for heroics and passionate people is a screaming for glory as uncritical and reflexive as the howling of a dog. By the way, there's only one guaranteed way of earning Congressional Medal of Honor, and that is throw yourself on a grenade, and you will get one. The trouble is almost always, people die, but that is the guaranteed way. Throw yourself on a grenade to save your comrades, and you will receive the Congressional Medal of Honor. Here's another kind of weird heroism. There's a photo of a German nurse who's charged with 97 more murders. What happened was they found that he poisoned his patients with a particular drug to show off his resuscitation skills to colleagues. See, that's heroism, and that's where it can lead. Activism is another way to try to live forever. Save the planet. Stop global warming. Why? Is it because you care that desperately for future generations? Oh, I really care about people I'm never going to meet. No, it is, if I stop this, and I'm not getting into the merits of global warming or not, that's not my point. My point is directed towards those who invest their whole lives into it, that there's nothing more important. It's because by doing this, they have an immortality project. They can live forever by doing things that are, socially helpful. And I went up to one guy, by the way, who was a Save the Whales guy. I said, you realize that the entire universe is going to get so cold because the sun's going to burn out. All the stars are sooner or later going to burn out, that you could go up to a whale, and if you tapped it with a ball-peen hammer, it would shatter into 1,000 pieces because it's going to be frozen solid. He goes, yeah, I know. Well, so you're not really going to live forever, even by saving the planet from global warming. You're not going to live forever, even symbolically. Why? Because our planet's going to die. It's a good thing there's eternal life in Jesus, isn't there? Making a difference is a type of activism. People go, you know what, I'm just going to help people and in this way make a difference. Zygmunt Bauman put it this way in his book Mortality and Immortality. He's a philosopher. He says, through making myself for the other, I make myself for myself. I pour meaning into my being in the world. I refuse the world the license to disdain and dismiss my presence. I force the world to note and to dread in advance my passing away, and to bewail it when it comes. See how you can live forever by just helping people? That's the sad thing, though, that Bauman said. Yikes! I'm helping you so that you'll need me, so that you'll revere me, and so that you'll dread my passing, codependent evermore. I don't want to have people in my life that are going, you know what, I'm going to help you because that way you will dread it when I'm gone. But there are a lot of people like that. Anyway, correct belief. That's another way that people are going to escape death, gain immortality, they think, is by helping other people understand what they understand. And Ernest Becker put it this way: no wonder men go into a rage over fine points of belief. If your adversary wins the argument about truth, you die. Your immortality system has been shown to be fallible. That's true, right? I mean, that's why so many people are like, you have to believe what I'm saying. You have to accept this. It's so true. Thus, so many conspiracy theories. You have to believe this, because they cling on to these things, because then it's their way of being immortal. They're helping the world understand the truth, and they're doing their part. Anyway, conspiracy theories become an immortality project. We all know that. I love the title of this book, Illusions of Immortality, A Psychology of Fame and Celebrity by David Giles. This is really important because you can see being a star or a celeb, right? That's a way of living forever from a symbolic sense. But listen to what he writes here. I don't think he's a Christian, but he says the Christian image of eternal salvation has declined, and the decline of religious faith in the West is in sharp contrast with the meteoric rise of celebrity culture. In other words, if you don't really believe that you're going to have eternal life in Jesus, you want to become famous. Louis XIV, who built the Temple of Versailles, and if you're ever in Paris, I really encourage you to go to Versailles because I think it's 820,000 square feet. The White House is 66,000 square feet. Louis XIV, the palace that he built, 820,000 square feet. Louis XIV said, "In my heart, I prefer fame above all else, even life itself. Love of glory has the same subtleties as the most tender of passions." Wow, right? How am I going to live on? I'm going to be famous. And Jeannie and I have been in the Hall of Mirrors. This is the Hall of Mirrors. He says, "I entrust to you the most precious thing on earth, my fame." Wow. There's nothing more important. And by the way, you can see the ceiling there. Almost every ceiling is of Louis XIV being wonderful in some way, like a god anyway. So fame, stardom, right? I'm going to be a star. I need to be famous, I want to light up the room like a, flame. Fame was the name of the song. Anyway, stardom drives people crazy. I love this shot of all these Justin Bieber girls crying their eyes out. Apparently Justin must not have been far when they were when that picture was taken. I like the girl that's got JB written on her cheek. And I love Justin on the back of her phone. Anyway, stardom is a way of, right? You can live on forever if you're a star. Celebrity. That's a very cropped picture of Kim Kardashian. She was showing off her substantial derriere, which obviously I'm not going to show, but being a celebrity. And what's Kim Kardashian famous for? She's famous for being a celebrity. She's famous for being Kim Kardashian. That's what she's famous for. The celebrity's self-centeredness runs ahead of any discernible talent, wrote Leo Brody in The Frenzy of Renown, Fame and Its History. He says, "It stokes on a diet of names and faces of others. I wonder why I shouldn't be famous too." Indeed, why shouldn't we be famous? And so people start a podcast, do something to be famous. Fandom, actually being a fan, is an immortality project. Why? My team. I'm going to support my team. I've known people that go, their team is just a loser. And loses is like every season for years. We used to have a joke about the Angels. I live not that far from the Anaheim Stadium. The joke about the Angels were, what would you call the Angels? This was before they won the World Series. What would you call the Angels if they were from Manila? And the joke was the Manila Folders. Anyway, but fandom can be a way of transcending your death. I'm a fan and I'm supporting my team. And if my team succeeds and if my team goes on forever, see, I've gone on forever in some weird sense because I've been supporting my team. Then there's what I just call spell my name right, or just spell my name right. In the Guinness Book of World Records, boy, I'll tell you, that's what it's all about, right? Just spell my name right. Some of the entries over the years are, one guy had the longest fingernails on a single hand ever. The combined length of his fingernails on his left hand was 358.1 inches. That made his left hand obviously useless for anything other than going, yeah, but I've got the longest fingernails in the world, ever. The one person had the largest collection of toothpaste tubes, 2,037. Wow, that's, you want to have that in the Guinness Book of World Records. This one's gross. Most milkshake dispensed through the nose, 1.82 ounces. Oh, ugh, gross. This one I like. This is one of my favorites. The most toilet seats broken by one's head in 1 minute, 46. Now, what came to his mind, the guy's mind that broke the toilet seats on his head? What happened to him one day where he went, you know what? I'm not good at anything else. I'm never going to be famous at anything else. But you know what? I could break toilet seats over my head, and I'm going to get good at it. Wow. That's bizarre. But see, that's the desperation for fame. Victimhood, by the way, is another way of living on symbolically. I'm the worst treated person on earth. Life doesn't treat me fairly. See, that's your immortality project. Mark Manson wrote a book. Well, the title's anyway. The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. I'll just put it that way. And you need to know, by the way, this book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F, was on the New York Times bestseller list for 323 weeks. 323 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. This book had a big impact. But listen to what Mark Manson says. Being average has become the new standard of failure. The worst thing you can be is in the middle of the pack. Thus, many people choose this strategy to prove to everyone that they're the most miserable, or the most oppressed, or the most victimized. On that point, Manson is absolutely correct. A lot of the people go, well, we're victims. They do that and go, we're the biggest victims of them all. That's a way of not being average. See? And so it becomes an immortality project. Mark David Chapman is the fellow who shot John Lennon. Of course, Lennon's in the top there next to Yoko Ono. And Mark David Chapman said, I committed this act for attention to, in a sense, steal John Lennon's fame. See, notice that being infamous is also a way of living on symbolically. You can be, if you can't be famous, be infamous. The Parkland shooter, the kid that went and shot 17 people in the Parkland High School, he said, today, he did a video, he said, today everybody's going to know who I am. The gunman who shot 851 people in Las Vegas, people go, why did he do that? Well, his brother said, well, he always wanted to be the best at everything, so you'd think that he wanted to have the highest casualty count. Notice what the people are doing, these terrible things for infamy, for fame, for somehow to be noticed. The Columbine shooters made a video. This was the first school shooting that I think ever happened. The Columbine shooters made a video discussing whether Tarantino or Spielberg would make the movie of their lives. Well, thankfully, neither Tarantino or Spielberg thought it was worth their time. And notice I'm not even mentioning those two punks' names. The harm of symbolic immortality attempts, there's many harms from them. One of them is jealousy. As Gore Vidal put it, whenever a friend succeeds, a little something inside me dies. And that's true, right? A lot of people have that. They can't stand watching others succeed. It's also very shallow. These symbolic immortality projects are extremely shallow. Woody Allen, the comedian, I think this is right on. He says, I don't want to achieve immortality through my work. I want to achieve immortality through not dying. In another place he wrote, I don't want to live on in the hearts of my countrymen. I want to live on in my apartment. Right? That's what's really going. I don't want to. It's not enough to go, well, I'm famous. I mean, think about it. The people that have done all these famous things from the past that are now dead, they're still dead. And we may talk about them, but that doesn't bring them back to life, and they don't really know we're talking about them or not. It's also futile. It's terribly futile. As philosopher Bertrand Russell put it, he says, all the labors of the ages, all the devotion, all the inspiration, all the noonday brightness of human genius are destined to extinction in the vast death of the solar system, and that the whole temple of man's achievement must inevitably be buried beneath the debris of a universe in ruins. True, right? As I said, all the stars are going to go dark sooner or later, and then the universe is going to become, below freezing, to say the least. I mean, it's going to go to absolute zero. There's nothing, you're not doing anything that's going to live forever, regardless, unless you're a Christian and you're in Jesus and you're going to be in heaven forever. That's the real immortality project. The rest of it's a waste. You see, the trouble with symbolic immortality projects is it becomes very, very selfish and evil. If you kill my children, stop my creation, hinder my activism or stand in the way of my making whatever difference that I think will give me symbolic immortality, then you are killing me. That's why the godless, in particular in our society, the godless are so desperate to maintain their immortality projects. They're so desperate to maintain, stop global warming or get this party elected or that, because that's all they have to live for. See, if you don't have Jesus to live for, if you don't believe there's a God to live for, then you're going to think that government is your God and you're going to do everything to make government succeed. Whatever government you think should succeed, you're going to do everything to make that government succeed. That's why when somebody stands in the way of what you think is politically true, these people, go berserk because you're killing them. You're killing their immortality project. If you get in the way of their immortality project, that means you are evil, and that means you must be stopped. But here's the good news, and I do mean the good news. There is real immortality available. And here's the most famous verse in the Bible, and I'll end with this. John 3:16. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. You can tell I memorized that in a different translation. But anyway, in Jesus, you really can live forever. You can have real immortality. And the last few words of John 3:16 are, shall not perish, but have eternal life. And that's what we all need to be seeking, is Jesus to have eternal life. In the next video, I'll talk about how atheists do what I call mortality mitigation projects. Talk to you then.